Hello everyone, welcome to Zooming in China Chat. I'm Simone Gao. Today we're going to show you the second part of my interview with Dave Stilwell, former Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. In the last episode, we talked about the possibility of a war over Taiwan in the near future. In this episode, we'll talk about where President Tsai Yingwen of the Republic of China stands in Taiwan's identity, namely, is she taking Taiwan towards independence, and whether a nuclear situation will ever be possible between America and China. Take a listen. Let me talk about President Tsai Ing-wen's recent move. Tsai Ing-wen has declared that ROC, Republic of China, and People's Republic of China do not belong to each other. And to China, this is an indication of moving towards independence. And the U.S. hasn't said anything about this yet. What do you think the U.S. stance is on this?
Our stance is that we let the DPP and the Taiwan government do what it thinks is best. We obviously are concerned of any just blatant statements of independence, which Beijing has said it would interpret as an invitation to invasion or whatever it goes. Yeah, they're very clear. I mean, Beijing is fuzzy on a lot of things. They employ ambiguity quite well too. But any overt declaration of independence, they have said in front of their own people multiple times that would be casus belli, that they would take that as the trigger to go to war. One of the key issues I mentioned before here is the fact that they have stated this in front of their own people. And I think Beijing is very concerned about how its own people view it, its legitimacy, especially in a period of time when the economy is faltering. You recall that the unholy agreement between the CCP and the Chinese people was, you allow us to run the country and we'll allow you to get rich. And people took that bargain. And they bought houses here in Hawaii that they could escape to, and they got blue passports, American passports for their families as escape plans and all that stuff, hedging their bets, right. But they allowed the government to rule. Well, what happens when the economy is no longer, cranking out 8% growth every year, and the people are starting to see their fortunes slip away? That, to me, is a pause. It gives you pause for concern, and that's a conversation we should be having, either at a low level or at the highest level. Maybe when President Biden speaks to Xi Jinping on Monday, it looks like. Maybe that's going to be one of the topics. Is hang on a sec. You throw this at every visiting delegation to read, and I've read it. And I don't know if you guys have read it, but basically saying that our way is just as valid as your way, and don't question or wreck it. Well, what if it's not? And what if the Chinese people no longer believe that his governance of China is not necessarily the way to go? This takes us to understand that all of these things have a domestic component that Xi Jinping has to consider, and we should consider that as well as we prepare for potential outcomes or bad outcomes.
Right. I agree with you that neither side, China or Taiwan, has the will to break the balance right now. China is not totally ready to invade Taiwan, and Taiwan definitely doesn't want to provoke anything. But there's one thing that may break the balance, and that's the 6th plenary session of the CCP they just had. So that meeting just finished, and it seems like Xi Jinping's position has been reinforced, and this might pave the way for him to take a third term in 2022. How do you think this will affect the situation in Taiwan if his position does get reinforced and he will get a third term?
It's really hard to say, but he's basically violating 60 years of since 79, 80. So he's violating 40 years of protocol. Their system basically said you get 2 terms, 5 years apiece. You can count on being in power for 10 years, but because we don't want to become the Soviet Union, remember that if you've seen the movie The Death of Stalin, I think you get a good idea of what a bad outcome looks like in this case.
Right.
They understand that there's got to be a transition. You can't have a cult of personality like Mao, because you see what happens. And I think we're seeing that happen now as well. You're seeing it when you have one person who gains too much power in the system, it will eventually take you into a dead end. The question about how this sixth plenum turned out, though, to me is still a question. If you read Xinhua People's Daily, it says, Xi is declared better than Mao or on par with Mao, however, whatever honorifics they come up after the core and the people's leader and whatever, they throw at him. I'm not sure. And I think that the jury is out as to whether we actually reinforce Xi Jinping's position here, or if there was a lot of tension and friction as people are questioning his ability to continue to lead. That won't come out for a while. We're not going to understand that. But if you read Desmond Shum's book, Red Roulette, which I hope everybody gets a chance to, it reads really well. Yeah. It's right up there with John Garneau's book, The Decline and Fall of the House of Bull, another great book, well, a similar subject, basically saying the facade of monolithic PRC CCP leadership is a facade. There's a lot, as with any human endeavor, there is a lot of back channel push and pull. There's, cliques and arguments and all that stuff. So if you look at what Desmond Shum just published, boy, that's got to put the CCP on notice, and it's got to really make them nervous that these things are leaking out more and more. I mean, you are seeing more leaks now from the PRC than you've seen in the past as well. That's people who are unhappy with how things are going. You can look forward to more of those leaks, which I believe will tell you that Sixth Plenum probably didn't go as well as they would have you believe. And the last thing I'll say on that is I read this stuff every day. I try to stay current on all these events. I can't keep up. I don't know about you, but I just can't keep up with the mountains of data coming out of Beijing and then the analysis that goes into that data. It's just overwhelming. I've never seen as much change, writing, policy suggestions, and all the rest as I've seen in the last 6 months or so. So all that's to say the jury's out. We have to employ time and patience and see how this pans out in 2 or 3 months.
Right, exactly. I agree with you. There's different opinions on the sixth plenary session. Their analysis is saying that Xi Jinping did not get what he wanted from this meeting. That's because the resolution did not put Xi Jinping above other communist leaders. And therefore, there still be a hard fight to be fought for the 2022 20th Congress, National Congress, and Xi Jinping might not get a third term. So from the American point of view, if Xi Jinping does not get a third term, how will that affect the Taiwan Strait relations?
I can't see, again, this is easily arguable, but personally, I can't see how that would be a bad thing. Because that indicates a reconsideration of the current strategy. The fact that the current people's leader was removed after all the efforts to change the system to allow him to govern through 2027 or beyond. The fact that that changed would tell you that there's been a rethink. And my hope, and I think this is accurate, is that they would sort of withdraw and get focused on fixing problems at home first. Get the domestic issues under control. The rampant corruption, in spite of the disciplinary inspection efforts by Wang Qishan and his successor, corruption still is a massive problem because the system runs on corruption. That's it's like cancer, man. You pull the cancer out, but you pull the affected organ as well. You can't separate the two. So he's going to have to deal with that for a much longer time. And I do believe he understands that corruption is going to be the downfall of the party. I remember stories of friends, in think tank friends in Beijing who lived near some PLA facilities, and they couldn't go to a high-end restaurant and have any fun because the uniformed PLA guys took the banquet room, and they took all the Mao Tai, and they took all the best food, and they made a heck of a lot of noise. And the people hear and see these things, and they don't like it. They're having a great time, and our economic prospects continue to decline. These are stories that, Simone, I think you guys can really help to expose as well, to show all is not well.
Right. I think one particular concern about Xi Jinping not be able to resume a third term is he will do something desperate before the 20.
Desperation.
Yeah, desperation. So would that be something the American part will consider, or nobody was thinking about that?
Oh, of course. I mean, we talk about that a lot. Diversionary wars, right?
Okay.
Things you do externally that create unity and support internally. Of course. But I can't think of one time that the PRC's done that. Some would point to Vietnam in 1979. I think that was all about splitting up an alliance between the Soviet Union and Vietnam. It had nothing to do with maybe securing Deng Xiaoping or Zhao Ziyang or whoever's position as they recovered, or actually I'll think of his name, Hu Yaobang, supporting his position post Mao. I don't see that. Again, the odds are against you in something like that. Here's the second question. Being a military guy, would the PLA obey those orders? When Xi Jinping first came to power in 2012, I remember hearing for the first time him say, PLA, you need to prepare for war. If you were to tell an American military person that, I would load up bombs, I would get them armed, and I would sit there on the end of the runway and wait for the order to take off, like we did in 1991 with Kuwait, to take off and go do my nation's bidding, protect our national interests through the military. So when Xi Jinping is telling the PLA, prepare for war, we all imagined the worst. But what we quickly understood was he's saying, no, actually, practice, maybe get good at doing your job, because we may need you to do it at some point in the future. But we need you to stop working in art auctions and real estate and all these other, commercial activities, and lining your pockets with all this ill-earned cash, and focus on your primary job, which is national defense. Party defense of the party, not defense of the nation. That's another key point with the PLA.
Right. So you think that's not something like the U.S. should take into consideration? A
key variable here in what you're suggesting is would the PLA fight?
Okay, within the PLA fight.
Because this is what if they determine this is a losing game? Because they would face Japan, the U.S., they'd probably see some Australian activity, India. You can imagine that they would have to look at the Western military region also getting involved if India or others chose to join in this, sort of a punitive response. So, yeah, I think there's enough doubt there that I don't know that the PLA would, sacrifice their pink bodies on some bad idea coming out of Beijing, especially if Xi Jinping is being seen as weak.
A former Chinese Navy officer told me that the PLA would not likely attack Taiwan within 3 years, because the PLA cannot beat the U.S. military in 3 years. Do you agree? And what about after 3 years? Will the PLA's capabilities catch up that of the U.S. military in the future?
So at risk of contradicting myself, I will say that when we use the terms win and lose related to armed conflict, I think that's a very bad idea. I can give you bunches of examples in the recent past, with the exception being Operation Desert Storm in 1991, where there really was no winning or losing. Look at Afghanistan. We initially went into Afghanistan and we removed the Al-Qaeda and terrorist threat, but was that winning? Or was that just temporarily delaying a problem or pushing it somewhere else? Iraq, Syria, all these things. Hard to say what winning or losing is, but we do know that blood will be spilled and that the political climate will change on the back end of this, to include, demonstrating an aggressive policy like that would most certainly push Taiwan, Japan, and others further into the U.S. camp. That's not, I don't think, a good trade-off if you're in Beijing. I don't think people are already beginning to question the fuzzy panda thing. As I said at the top of the call, what you do here in very clearly painting the contrast between a democratic and free market Taiwan and an increasingly belligerent and authoritarian PRC is really important for the American people. We need to understand that they're not the same thing. And as much as Xi Jinping tries to tell us that his new type of governance, which, here we go. 新时代习近平中国特色社会主义, right? That's a long way of saying 思想, throw that at the end. Xi Jinping thought really isn't valid. It's just more authoritarianism. you can have a hard time demonstrating that's a valid way to go, especially since communism died in 1991 with the Soviets. So it's a tall bill. It's a tall order. Try to turn a win out of this. I don't see it happening.
Mm-hmm. Okay. China has been building up its nuclear capabilities. Do you think a nuclear situation will ever be possible in the Taiwan Strait or between U.S. and China?
Anything's possible. What's interesting is, and look, anything having to do with PRC claims of warheads, capabilities, economic data, anything you get out of the party has to be questioned. You can't take it at face value. This really bothers me about Wall Street and others is, claims of 6.1 or 8% growth. They buy that. And I'm digressing here, but the point is about nuclear claims. And then if you look at Luckin Coffee and Didi Chushir and Alipay and all these other things, you scratch that a little bit and all of a sudden you realize there's nothing there. The Luckin Coffee is a great example of basically a Ponzi scheme, shell game, that people were putting good American retirement money into, thinking it was actually a real deal, and it wasn't. So first off, I would say any data that comes out of Beijing, you have to question it. If you don't have any way of independently verifying what they're saying, I wouldn't believe it, because remember, the party manipulates all this data. There's still only 4,636, a little over 4,000 official deaths from COVID in China. That's the official data. Does anybody believe it? No, of course not. So why would we put any stock into any other claims they make? On claims of nuclear capability, nuclear intent, all those things, again, I would question those. I would make sure that we keep our options open in case what they're saying isn't true. What they said in the past is that they didn't need a large nuclear capability because of no first use and all those things. They needed a small retaliatory capability. And they seem to be coming off of that as satellite imagery shows missile silos and all the rest. On that, and on issues like basing overseas, and that, I would say that it is a little disingenuous of us to deny the PRC the ability, in case of basing or nukes, to defend its own interests. They are in the big leagues now. They still claim to be a developing country. We know that's not true. But they have significant energy and other resource interests in Australia, in Africa, that they have to protect those lines of communication. And so a base on the west coast of Africa makes sense to me. I mean, we did it. I think it's something that we can turn to our advantage if we would just think about it. Same thing with nukes. If they see themselves as a great power, and if they see their relationship with the U.S. is increasingly hostile, it's always been hostile on their side. We're finally, joining the fight. But as they see that, it would make sense that they would have to build up their, not just conventional, but nuclear arsenal. So I'm not alibying, excusing it, approving it. I'm just saying it makes sense as a great power with interests that they would want to do that. Linking it to Taiwan's another issue, and we've heard Chinese statements in the past about, I think you value Los Angeles more than Taipei. I don't have a whole lot to say on that.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you that question because there seems to be an understanding among the Chinese military personnel and even average Chinese citizens that the China have a advantage over the U.S. regarding nuclear wars because China can fight a unlimited war. A PLA General Zhu Chenghu once said that China can afford to lose the whole population east of Xi'an. America cannot do that. So particularly if this is for Taiwan. So when it comes down to it, China has an advantage over the U.S. on a nuclear situation. What's your thoughts?
I love that quote. I wish you could get Enes Kanter on this show and ask him how he feels about that. I mean, that's a really bold statement about how little they value their minorities, isn't it? Everything west of Xi'an is either Hui or Uyghur or Tibetan or whatever. I mean, that is so telling as to this idea of human rights and other things. Mao Zedong said the same thing after the Great Leap Forward, right? 3 years of really bad policy resulting in 36 million dead of his own people. And they asked him, how do you assess all this? He goes, well, we had too many people anyway. I mean, geez. It does give you an idea of exactly how they think. A really wise fellow defense attaché named Frank Miller calls this concept is amorally practical, doing what makes sense, whatever, even if it's to only a little advantage, doing it without regard to the values of the morality of any certain thing. So yeah, losing 100 million people, shoot, we got 1.4. That's a very small price to pay. Is that the calculus in a nuclear exchange? That one I don't think really applies because, as you know, I won't go too far into nuclear deterrent theory because my memory is old and dated, but there's two ways you target nuclear weapons: countervalue or counterforce. Countervalue is targeting the people. This is what Chu Chung-hu says. It's just wipe out the population. Again, I'm talking in nuclear pre-1991 sense, right? And then counterforce is basically taking everything from the PLA up to the top of the command chain, the people who order the PLA, which is the leadership, and then you target that. That's not west of Xi'an. Now, I mean, there's bunkers and tunnels and all those concepts, but I'm sure the folks in what was RPAL, this 2PLA, I think Strategic Rocket Force now, have briefed the boss on that. This is how the Americans approach nuclear combat, and we would definitely be in you, the leadership, would be in the targeting plan. And is it worth it to you to be obliterated? And I think Mao would say no. I'm pretty sure the rest of the leadership would say no as well. So that's it. That's everything I know about Chinese nuclear stuff. I would just say that these things all add a deterrent pressure on the decision to turn keys and start launching nuclear warfare. Its capability, it's again posturing. I can't imagine anybody actually seriously employing nukes over Taiwan ever.
Okay. And the bottom line is America would not be intimidated by the Chinese using a nuclear weapon on any occasion, because their calculation, I think, is once we use a nuclear weapon, America will be intimidated and will retreat.
Oh boy, that's not a good way. Look what happens. You attack the U.S. on December 7th or on 9/11, 2001, and look what happens to the American population. You want to unite the American population? Attack it, right? Attack Americans, right? And we have policy on that as far as responding. That I think makes it a very bad calculus. But this then, Simone, takes us to a completely different conversation, which we can do later, but I just want to tee it up. Is this desire, this endless begging for dialogue, this need to, and I think there's value in having military leaders talk and laying out that'd be a really bad course of action, and you would be on the losing end, my friends in Beijing. But until they want to talk, it's not worth even considering. Begging for dialogue, just sending Wendy Sherman or John Kerry to do a VTC in Tianjin tells you how much they value dialogue. Right. They're clearly not ready to talk. Our approach was we're just going to fold our arms and continue to apply pressure, well considered, but increasing pressure, knowing that there will come a point where they will want to talk and have and start working out some sort of accommodation. Until that time, there's no point in getting together and having a conversation, because they're just going to posture, grandstand, and do things that make them look better to their own domestic audience and to global audiences. And I don't think there's a good outcome there.
Many people think that Xi Jinping has determined to solve the Taiwan problem during his tenure. And if, I don't know if you agree, but if you agree, what do you think will be the timetable, most likely timetable for him? People have been talking about 2049, 2035, even 2027. What's your thoughts on those?
Well, I think we're all aware of Admiral Davidson's statement that he's looking at 2027. I think his successor at Indo-PACOM repeated that. I don't think that statement's based on intelligence. I think it's based on the larger understanding of what Xi Jinping says. He says this is not a problem. Taiwan is not a question I'm going to bequeath to the next generation. Basically saying, as you just said, I'm going to solve this on my watch. So then I'll point back to another historical example. The two centenary goals. One of those goals was that that they would accomplish this rejuvenation and the standing up of China's and well-respected global power by 2000, by the millennium. That was Mao's goal. And when it became obvious that that was way too aggressive and optimistic, they slipped it to 2049, the 100-year anniversary of the establishment of the Communist Party. So these, in a situation where you control the information so tightly, as is the case in China, you can tell any story you want. I mean, read 1984 or watch the movie where, Winston Smith, our hero, goes back and he cuts out historical statements that he doesn't like and he inserts new ones into the bound volumes of newspapers. They can do that too. Digression. There's a great photo, and I got to find it again. Early on in the pandemic, there's a headline at Global Times that says, "The Wuhan virus is under control and there's no problem here," or something like that. And then about a month later, after they realized that Wuhan virus meant the world was going to make sure that China owned this problem because that's where it came from, and after the language of COVID came out, they went back historically and changed something that was already archived online and changed it to say, instead of Wuhan virus, they changed it to say COVID-19. They are not allergic to playing those sorts of, horrible 1984-ish Orwellian games with their own people. So they can manage the narrative inside China any way they want. And if they need to slip it 10 more years, or if 2027 is no longer the goal, then they create a narrative inside China that explains why they couldn't, blames somebody else for it, and then they drive on. So yes, the timing is a concern, but to me, they have proven many times that they won't be bound by timelines. We've got 4-year or 8-year election periods that we have to, if we really want to get something done, we have to get things done inside. Their timing is much more fungible than that.
All right. Okay, well said, Dave. Anything else you want to add?
No, I appreciate the chance to share these thoughts, though, because this question is growing and you can hear an increasing demand for it. So what you're doing here is really important.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Stilwell. Thank you for coming to Zooming In today.
You bet. My pleasure.
Thank you. That's it for today. Thanks for watching Zooming In China Chat. Please like, share, subscribe, and donate to this program if you like my content. As I've announced before, we're producing a documentary movie right now, Xi Jinping's War over Taiwan. It will come out by the end of this year. Zooming In members will get an early view of this movie. Our website is zoomingin.tv. Also, for our members, I would like to let you know that our website is experiencing some technical problems right now that resulted in payments not being processable. Therefore, your membership might be automatically canceled. We're fixing this problem right now, and once it's fixed, we will send individual emails to every member so you can enroll again. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.